for our final talk for this morning session, entitled Tips and Tricks on How to Publish in Springer Nature Journal, that will be delivered by Dr. Suvira Srivastav, Editorial Director General of Springer Nature. And this slot will be moderated by Associate Professor Dr. Shahrul Naim bin Sidi. You are invited to moderate, Doctor.
Okay. Thank you very much, Brother Tuan. I hope everybody can hear me. Okay. All right. That's a very interesting talk by Dr. Pam, and I hope the ripple of excitement will be carried over towards this the talk, which is no less important for PG students. In fact, for those who are doing research, of course, your research finding should be shared, and how to share your research finding with us today. We have Dr. Suvira Srivastav. Let me read some detail about her. Dr. Srivastav is editorial director journals. She leads mathematics, physical, and applied sciences journals of India and computer science in Asia Pacific. As part of Springer Nature senior leadership team, her team acquires, manages, and develops the most prestigious journals of the country, along with Springer Nature's flagship broad scope journal in computer science under the special Springer Nature imprint. In her various roles within the company, Springer Nature, Dr. Srivastav has acquired and developed books, conference proceedings, and journals as part of computer science discipline. She has been instrumental in establishing major publishing partnerships that have benefited researchers and different publishing units of Springer. She has established book series with the awardees of Infosys Science Foundation and journal book partnership with societies and institutes of repute. She is an author of 2 books, a knowledge management expert, an avid writer, and a former columnist of leading dailies of India. She brings with her the experience of establishing knowledge, network, and program in Asian countries. So her talk basically will also answer the question how to become a smart researcher and author. And without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Srivastav to present her talk. So the screen is yours, Doctor. Please.
Sorry, Dr. Daim. Dr. Suvira is not in the call now. She has some problem in logging in. Do you mind to give her a few minutes? She said she is signing in but has some problem.
Oh, yes, sure, no problem.
I'm already there. Can I be heard? Oh yes, very much there.
Just in time.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I'll need to be given the share screen. Yes. So because it says that my sharing screen is disabled. Kindly give me the rights for sharing screen. Yeah.
Dr. Suvira, I already give you as a co-host. Can you try it?
Yes, I will try it now. Yes, so we are all set. Can you all see my screen now?
Yes, it's clear.
Yes, we have seen.
Okay. A very warm welcome to all of you. In fact, I'm so grateful to be given this opportunity to share my experience with the researchers. In fact, every time I do this kind of virtual webinar, technology never ceases to amaze me. I'm sitting in one part of India, you all are in Malaysia, and we are still connected. And that is the connection that even publishing has with all of us. And what I bring to you today is from my experience and that of millions of other editors, authors, editorial board members that we work with, my own colleagues who are based in different locations, working in Springer Nature. It's a concise, form of whatever we know, whatever we have learned from working in Springer Nature or working with all of you. I'm trying to bring together all that. So that's why you will find very interesting ways of engaging with you. I also have with me Mabel Tang and Kent. They will be working with me, and trying to make this workshop more interactive. And so we'll come up with polls. Mabel, would you like to mention how we would like to go about it before I start talking?
Sure. I have sent a link in the chat box to everyone. So you can just go to menti.com and key in the code 3069542. During the whole section, we will ask you several questions, and please tick the box when you see that question, and then we will announce the results to Dr. Suvira.
Yeah, now for seamless, seamless reaching out to you, I have switched off my video so that my internet connection doesn't leave me in lurch in between. So here we go. This is what we have come together today. Our today's coming together has a focus on the goal to be more than just an author and be an effective communicator. So what is it that you require to do so? Obviously, a manuscript, which is like the script of your story where each portion is logically linked to another so that your readers clearly understand the impact of the study. When your papers have more impact, they will be better or highly cited. You will build your reputation worldwide and that of your institution. This paves way to establishing new international collaborations, all of which will help you in advancing your career. That is why what you see on your screen right now is we'll talk about how to logically come up with the structure of your manuscript. There are ways in which you can really get out of those mind blocks and also ensure that you come up with a winning manuscript that can be accepted by various journals. Then you need to have a strategy to publish it, obviously, because just keeping your manuscript in cold storage will not help you. So how should you go about it? How should you try to publish that manuscript? And then how can you submit? In between all this, there'll be tips and tricks. As I said, I am trying to bring together to all of you the experience of millions of others that we work with. So in between, you will have tips and tricks to be a smart researcher, because there are so many journals, there are so many publishers, there are so many authors. It's a mad world over there, and we want to find our place in between. How do we do that? There are little ways in which you can do that. There are some tools which are available. What are those? We'll talk about all those today. Now, before I go any further, just a little bit about the company that I represent, just to give you an idea of the difference between the different journals that we have. Now, you may be wondering who is Springer Nature, because you may have heard these names separately. The companies merged together in 2015 to form Springer Nature. What does that mean? This means that we bring to you various brands: Nature Research, BMC, Springer, Scientific American, Palgrave Macmillan. All these brands, when you hear about in various journals, you see these logos in various journals. These are all the same company. And what these brands bring together to you is an unmatched breadth and depth of quality information. Means that there is a journal for every research area, whether niche or broad science, and for all, be it early career researcher or top researchers in their field. So there is something for everybody, and offering, reflecting on the quality of the journals. We have an in-house team that constantly assesses, selects, and ensures that we meet the criteria of each viable abstracting and indexing databases, which I mentioned over here, from Scopus to Web of Science, Medline, etc. We are, there is no magic wand, I can tell you, to get your journal. Like, it's not that if we are Springer Nature or any other good global publisher, that whatever we'll be publishing will automatically get indexed in this. No, it doesn't happen like this. We all vouch for the quality of these abstracting and indexing databases, because all the journals coming from anywhere have to work towards getting indexed in these ANI databases which are available. But the endeavor is to ensure that our authors and readers can discover the content and reassure them that it meets the standards of these databases. So we'll be coming back, in our today's coming together, that what is the difference, how do you, whether you have to actually focus on these databases or anything else, depending on the level of career you are, what is it that you should look for. Having said that, coming back to the main thing that we have come together for, logical manuscript structure. Now, talking about manuscript structure, there's something that I would like to ask you all. How is it that you start working on a manuscript? You have a task in hand. You have to come up with a manuscript. How do you start doing it? Which is the portion that you all start working on? Is it the title, the introduction, the abstract, methods, conclusion? What is it that you start working on? These are a couple of things, and that's where you can be actually smart. Now, why is it that a manuscript is divided into these portions? Because to be an effective communicator, always keep the reader in mind and provide the information they are looking for. For example, your readers will have 4 main questions about your study. Why did the study need to be done? What did you do? What did you find? And how does this study advance the field? Because of this, the articles are structured in such a way to answer each of the reader's questions. It has the introduction, methods, the results, and the discussion. We'll look at each one of these briefly. And before we proceed, here is the first tip of the day: publishing timeline. I often get queries from researchers in great hurry to publish, but just as your research takes time, so does publication of an article. There is no magic wand, as I said, that can expedite peer review process. And remember, peer review process is the foundation of academic publishing, and it takes time. The time frame varies as per the availability of reviewers, number of revisions, etc. So plan things in a way that you have time in hand. Over here also, you can be smart in trying to assess how much time the journal is going to roughly or on an average take in going through the peer review process. We'll reflect on that in a while. Secondly, what can help in expediting publication? It is actually the manner in which the article is written, which means it has to be easy to understand. Simple language works best and minimizes confusion. Sometimes using synonyms without understanding the exact meaning can complicate things and completely change the meaning of a sentence. So remember, just as we are not native English speakers, there are many more of our editor-in-chiefs, editorial board members, even reviewers who are not. So we have to, the idea is that, we are not sitting across the desk in front of them, reading out the paper and explaining to them what we have written. It's all, whatever we are showcasing is in that article. So the article has to be written in very simple language so that anybody, whether from your discipline or from any other discipline, can understand that. This is really, really important. Moving on. Another very important thing is, what do you start writing first? And here it is how you have to go about it. The most logical and easiest order is where you have the confidence and what's easiest for you. So the first section you should tackle while you are doing your actual work is the materials and methods. And as you are collecting your results and analyzing them, you can start to write them up too. Invariably, this aspect will always remain same. 2 methods, 2 completed sections add to your confidence. It's actually a mind game. When you know that 1/4 of your manuscript is almost there, you start getting the confidence that yes, you can do it. And that really makes all the difference. Then work on the next sections. After you have selected your target journal, you can then write the introduction and discussion. Now, there is another reason for saying that. The reason for this is because there are usually very strict guidelines from journals on how to present these sections. It saves you time by knowing your target journal before you start writing. That way, you don't waste time in reformatting your manuscript. And it can be really exhausting if you have to rewrite everything again and again. So be sure of where you want to submit, then look at instruction for authors, which are always given on the website of the journal. It's easily available. Go through that, don't ignore it. It's really important because there are certain specific requirements that majority of the journals have. The very last thing you should write are the title and the abstracts. Now, speaking to so many researchers across Asia, what I have seen is that this is the section that they start working on first. And this is the most difficult one. Everybody that I've spoken to says that they struggle with this one. So if you start struggling from the very beginning, it's like a lost game even in the beginning of what you have started to work on. So work on this in the last, because to write an effective abstract and title, you need to have a manuscript that is nearly complete, as these are meant to be accurate summaries of your entire manuscript. That's why, and we will now deal with each and everything systematically. And because I'm saying that methods and results are the ones which need to be tackled first, I'll refer to methods first. Now, talking about methods. Now, when we are talking about methods, again, whenever you are writing a manuscript, always keep in mind your audience, your readers, and the question that you are referring to. The question to be addressed is what you did. That is what you are trying to answer in methods. This section will be important. Now, again, this is what you have to understand. Why you are writing this. This is important for researchers in your field to not only reproduce what you have done, but also to build on what you have done. Isn't it? That is how research is continued. We don't work in blind alleys. The more people that build on your work, the more impact and influence you will have in the field, building your reputation worldwide. However, please keep in mind that this section is not only essential for researchers in your field, but it is also one of the first sections carefully evaluated during peer review. So if reviewers see that you did not do an appropriate or up-to-date methodology, and maybe the survey was not done in the right way, they will often usually recommend the journal editor to reject the manuscript. So be sure to include all the information your readers need to critically evaluate your study design. Then, moving on to the actual writing. First, you will need to discuss who and what was used in your study, followed by describing how you performed the experiments, the survey, whatever you were working on, including any controls necessary to validate these techniques, or maybe the sample size that you were using had certain restrictions, or there were certain things which you would like the readers to let know of. It's better to mention it now. Lastly, you need to describe how you analyzed your data. So mention about maybe the quantification methods, or maybe the variables and assumptions, and identify maybe the statistical tests that you use to determine significance. If you logically organize all the relevant information about your study design, you will have successfully answered the second key question. Remember, this is not your, the diary or the register that you are maintaining to note down things. It is something which you are trying to convey. So sometimes what you are trying to write in your lab books or in presenting to your supervisor is different from what you are mentioning in your research paper. So keep in mind your audience. That is very, very important. And that is what will help you in identifying what actually to pick up while you are writing this method. Then the second is results. The question, which question is it that you have to keep in mind is that although you are very familiar with all your findings, your readers are not. So if you do not logically present your findings, they can easily be confused. Sometimes it happens that when a peer reviewer sends your comments and you're like, why am I being asked this? Did I not or actually mention it? But when you go through it, you realize, well, that is what you missed out on. It was all there, but where was it? In your head, not in the manuscript. So for many fields, a nice logical presentation includes initial observation, characterization of that observation, and finally, how this observation is useful for the field. So if, and there are also, when you are describing results, past tense has to be used because that's something which has already been mentioned, but refer to figures and tables in the present tense. Uh, all of a sudden there is an echo of my voice and I can tell that I can hear what I'm saying. If we can mute everybody, yes, that's better. So what I was saying was that results have to be written in past tense, but figure and tables in present tense. Present the facts, but do not discuss the results. Do not duplicate data among figures, tables, and text, because there are limitations when you are submitting a manuscript. It's not your thesis. So keeping in mind the limitations of words and pages, etc., depending on the journal that you're submitting to, be very mindful of the data that you are presenting in your manuscript. And talking about the data, there is another very important thing. Taking a clue from the first helpful tip of clarity and simplicity, you should also write the results section in subsections, right? Wherein each has a clear subheading and corresponding to a single figure or a table. This is because it is easier for readers to understand the complex information when it is presented one bit at a time. It avoids information overload. For example, each subsection can begin by introducing the findings, such as figure 1 shows, or first we did, etc. In that way, readers know what to expect in that subsections, and in that way, you are also guiding them to look at your table of figures which are given within the manuscript. And when readers know what to expect, what to look for, they will understand those ideas more quickly. So with methods and results in place, let's move on to the next section, which is introduction. Introduction tackles the first question that our readers want answered: why your study needed to be done. This is generally answered in this section. So you should start off, as you can see in this figure, you should start off broad and then guide your readers down to the specific aims or research questions. So begin with the basic background informations your readers need to understand the context of your study, but also keep in mind the type of journal you are submitting to. So for example, if you are submitting to an international journal, be sure to emphasize the worldwide relevance of your topic, because in some way you are also, you are also marketing your manuscript to the editor-in-chief as to why he should be accepting this particular manuscript of yours if it is an international journal. So you have to give the reference as to why this has to be done. Further, if you are submitting to a broad focus journal, you will need to provide more background information so people outside your immediate field can more clearly understand the context of your research. However, if you are submitting to a specialized journal, you will not need to give so much background information because most of the journal's readers will likely already be familiar with your topic. And once you have provided context, you now need to tell your readers what is currently known about your topic. That is what has been recently published about this topic, making sure you cite studies that are up to date and broadly distributed worldwide. This is especially important if you are submitting to an international journal. What I have seen is that many a times, many of the editor-in-chiefs actually look at your references, how dated that references are. Now, sometimes, there are certain classics. So if you are doing if you are submitting a manuscript in a certain area, so the experts will know that there are certain things that you should have referred to. If you did not, then maybe there's something basically wrong. So there are certain classic things and there are certain very, depending again on the field, like if you are from engineering and computer science, then they would like to see the latest references. Maybe in human science, that may not matter that much, again, depending on the area and the field that you are referring to. Now, it is in this sync of your story that will help a reader and peer reviewer to clearly understand why your study needs to be done. Now, the next slide actually refers to the discussion. To do this, you need to, this is the final section, the discussion. In this, an author answers the last key question, which we had seen on the first slide, how your study contributes to the field. If you may remember, the intro section had an inverted triangle because I like to think of this section as the opposite of the introduction. In the introduction, you start broad and then narrowly guide your readers down to specific aims. Over here, it's the opposite. In the discussion, you want to start narrow because you are discussing what you are doing, summarizing your key findings, and then guide your readers back to the general implications these findings have for the fields. So to do this, you need to interpret your findings, describe how your findings are similar or different compared with those that have already been published, discuss any unexpected or negative results. You should never ever hide results from your readers because that is how discoveries can be advanced. If you are hiding certain facts which are really important, then the readers who would like to take forward your research will always be struggling because they will not be getting, they'll not be having the complete information. And just be sure to describe why you think you observed these findings and how your future research can further address them if necessary. Lastly, be sure to describe any limitations in your study designs. Maybe if the data was picked up from somewhere else and that had certain limitations, the survey had certain limitations. We need to mention that. Your ability to identify your limitations and what measures were taken to control them establishes your expertise in the field. This is really important. So keep those things in mind. Sometimes we feel, if I'll mention that, will that sound like I was not actually up to the mark? Actually not. That will actually determine that you know what you're talking about. You know what you did and why you did and how you did. That's important. At the end of your discussion, sometimes as a separate section is the conclusion. Now, please remember that this is the last section that will be read, meaning it is likely to be what is remembered most by your readers. So be sure to discuss in conclusion what is most important about your study, including the main conclusion, key implications, and potential future directions. Basically, if you logically organize your discussion in this way, it will be clear for the readers how your study contributes to the field. So far, what we have seen is that besides logical structure, every manuscript speaks a story in which ideas are linked together throughout your manuscript. This is important because you can't say I started with A, I ended with B, and then maybe it is X that you all should be looking for. If that is how you are writing a manuscript, then how can we attract the attention of editor-in-chiefs, editorial boards, peer reviewers, and even your readers? So everything has to be logically linked together. And I already mentioned that your objectives should be directly related to the research problem, but this also means that your key findings should be only those that are related to your objectives. Firstly, be sure that a conclusion answers the questions you identified in introduction. So you can see these arrows leading to the same thing, objectives. We started with something in mind and how we achieved it. That is what we are going to put together in our manuscript. In fact, to the point of being very repetitive, think of your manuscript like a story. If you're watching a movie and you see that everything is totally disintegrated, would you be interested in seeing that movie? Not really, isn't it? So this is your story, your movie. If you highlight an important problem in the beginning of your story, your readers expect an answer. That is why they'll continue to read. That is why they are referring to your article. So those questions have to be answered. That answer is your conclusion. Linking your ideas together, as you can see over here, together throughout your manuscript will help emphasize the significance and relevance of your study for your readers. Now, one more thing which I wanted to say over here was that when we are writing our manuscript, another thing that we need to keep in mind is be humble. Do not overstate the importance of our results. Sometimes what happens is that we are so overwhelmed. We'll say this is the first in the world, best in the world, first time done, etc. Well, a better way of saying it is that our findings prove that, our findings show that, our findings suggest that. Being humble always helps us. Having said that, moving on to the most difficult section, the title. Now, before your readers will have a chance to read your paper, most important uh, is this, the title that will be attracting attention. And the onus of this lies with obviously the title. This is what people will first see when looking for articles to read. And because of this, there are some important points to keep in mind about what you should include. Title should clearly state what is most important about your study. That is what your readers are looking for. Title will also be used in indexing by databases online. It's a digital world, so we need to keep that in mind. So be sure to include 1 or 2 keywords to improve visibility. You know, how we global publishers work is that we are really advanced in search engine optimization. And we also ask you to give some keywords when you are submitting your manuscripts. Those keywords are used behind the scenes for search engine optimization. So if those words are not correct, then obviously the readers will not be guided to your article. Now, one thing is getting your article accepted in a journal. The other thing is getting your readers to read. These two things are different. Now, just simply by getting your article accepted does not mean that people will start reading it. And it also does not mean that people will start citing it. These three things are in a way linked, yes, yet quite disintegrated. So you have to be smart. Give those keywords which you feel will be picked up by the databases. Lastly, keep the title short. When people are quickly reading pages after pages of titles in these online databases, they may skip ones that are too long. Don't let that happen to you. And now, what should you avoid in the title? Firstly, avoid questions until or unless it's like human science disciplines, again, vary from discipline to discipline. These types of titles, why are they not good? Because it is not what readers are looking for. They have questions, they want answers. The answer to their question is what is important. Also avoid method-based titles. Again, varies from discipline to discipline, but invariably, readers want to know what you found, not what you did. For both questions and method-based titles, readers need to read the abstract to find what they are looking for. That wastes their time. Lastly, avoid abbreviations, especially if you are submitting to broad scope journals, because sometimes, like if we are saying FEA, now if a mechanical engineer is reading that, well, they will say, yeah, this is finite element analysis. Now, how do you expect someone else from a different background to find out what you mentioned by FEA? And sometimes what the research community in a particular discipline refers to in an abbreviation, it could be having a very different meaning for another research community. So keep those things in mind. You don't want to take people away from your article. In the digital world, when they're journals, there are so many journals, there are so many distractions. You really want people to read your hard work, whatever you have come up with. So these are a couple of the things that you have to keep in mind. The crux is that your title is a concise description of what is important about your study. And that is what you have to keep in mind. Now, another thing that I personally do many a times is that when you are, all of us, while working on our research, read a lot. And when we are reading, we come across certain titles, some highly cited titles, some very well written titles. Start jotting down those in one file, maybe register, whatever way that you think is the best way for you to have that information available as and when you need it. over a period of time, you'll find that you have a list of some very nice titles that you really liked reading and that you felt that in some ways actually were so close to what you had in mind. And when you start working on your title, you know, just pick up that document and start reading from 1 to say 50. And you'll realize after a while, when you have read a couple of those titles, that segment of your brain gets ignited and you'll start coming up with some ideas. Start jotting down those ideas. And after that, you will see that you have at least 10, 15 ideas, rough drafts that you feel are the best representation of your work, and then start refining those. That is one way of looking at it. The other way of igniting that aspect of your mind is, of your brain, if you know, if you're struggling, then is to start looking at maybe printed advertisements in magazines, in newspapers. And what are those? Why am I saying advertisements? Because what are advertisements? Those are also a very concise, catchy, reflection of what a company wants to talk about, maybe a product, maybe a service, whatever they have in mind. Now, if they can say that, if they can do it in a couple of words, just look at those punchlines, just look at those phrases that they are using, and that will actually start it will actually help you in thinking in that direction. And when you start thinking in that direction, then you move on to those titles that you have accumulated over a period of time. The combination of this will actually help you in coming up with something very nice that you'll be very happy about. Then, moving on from titles to abstract. Abstract is again important. One thing that people often ask, and they often, I mean, many of the researchers have asked me is that, I'm writing an abstract. Do you think I can write in inverted commas something that I picked up from one of the papers? Well, abstract is actually like your showtime, because this is where you will actually let your editor-in-chiefs, your boards, your reviewers, readers, everybody, what is it that you have in mind? Now, when it is your showtime, do you think you should allow someone else to take the credit of that? The answer is no, isn't it? It's a logical answer. So in that way, why should we pick up what we have to reflect in this showtime in the words of someone else? And why should we be thinking whether it has to be inverted commas or not? Everything has to be in your own word, in your own words. That's important. So your abstract need to have relevance of your aims, importance of your results, validity of conclusions, obviously be very simple in writing, and this is likely to be the part that will be the most read. So think of abstract from that point of view, a very small para which has a summary of each one of these three things put together for the benefit of readers. And because this is so very important, I've just tried giving you a breakup of what should be included and how. Suppose if in abstracts are invariably say 250 words, and this slide refers to what percentage of which aspect need to be mentioned in an abstract. As results are more important, obviously they'll take the most space, 40%. And rest you can see over here, problems addressed. What is it that you started with? Just a line. What was the hypothesis? What techniques you use? Another line. And then you talk about the results that you achieved and a concluding statement. This, if you organize or structure these 250 words or a para in this way, this is the best way that you can actually present your work to your readers. Now, there are some general rules for abstracts. What are the things that you should not include? References, as I said, do not think of putting things in inverted commas, no references. It's your showtime, your time to showcase what you did. So no references in that. Similarly, no abbreviations. You don't want to drive away your readers from your abstract, because if they don't understand, why should they go ahead and download your article and start reading it? So similarly, jargons and slangs, that is again a big no-no. Then non-essential numbers and statistics. Do not try to pack your abstract with everything that you can think of. Think of it in a very rational way. What you started, why you started, what is it that you achieved, how is it that you achieved? Just these couple of questions. If these are answered in these 250 words, keeping in mind no references are there, no abbreviations, no jargon and slangs, you have actually come up with a nice abstracts. Now, before we start any further, I would like to understand from you all, because this is, had we been there together, I would have asked you questions, you would have come back to me. This would have actually helped me in understanding your level of understanding of certain things. And also because we are all coming together for certain, with certain objectives. And so I would also like to understand from you what you understand about the unique identity of researchers in this world. Mabel, is it there? And yeah, okay. So there are two questions. The first one is, which of the following provides a unique identity to the authors in the research world? Is it DOI or the digital object identifier? Is it ORCID? Is it passport? Is it resident identity card? What is it that you all think is your identity in the research world? Because we have so many researchers. How does the editor-in-chief or reviewers identify you, that's you, wherever you may be? I mean, you may be in this university or another one, in Malaysia or anywhere overseas, your identity remains the same. How does that happen? Are we receiving any results?
Yeah, people are voting now, and if you are still not yet in menti.com, please log in to this link with the code provided in the checkbox. So we will give every question around 10 seconds to answer. So the first one, 49, no, it's still coming in. Okay, so we stop here. So 50% say that DOI is the right one, and then 40% say it's ORCID ID. The other remaining like passport or residential identity card.
Okay, let's run the second one. Do you have an ORCID ID? And then I'll talk about it. Now, while you all are actually answering this poll, let me mention that DOI, or the digital object identifier, is the identity of your article in the digital world. Now, just as ISBN is the number that a published book gets, ISSN is the identity of the journal. Similarly, the identity of your article is determined by DOI, or digital object identifier. Whereas it is the ORCID IG actually, which is your identity in the research world. And so the question is, do you have an ORCID ID or not? And after you have answered this, we will actually look at ORCID ID, why it is important, and how can that help you in becoming a smart researcher. So do we have the answer? Yeah.
Yeah, we only have 19% have the ORCID ID. The others have said no.
Okay, so this is your action point. Why is ORCID ID important is something that you can see over here. There are so many researchers with the same name. To remove ambiguity and to give each one of them a unique identity, ORCID ID is the solution. Now, this ORCID ID is not by Springer or Elsevier or Nature. It's actually a not-for-profit thing, and it has been developed keeping in mind the problems which were coming in. Now, just as now, suppose you have a name that may be a little similar to someone else. So how do you identify yourself in amongst so many researchers? Similarly, now when the editor-in-chief is actually giving a paper to a reviewer or asking someone known to them to come up on the journal editorial board and become an editorial board member, now it's all in the digital world. How do they identify that they are actually dealing with the right person? This ambiguity is removed by this ORCID ID, which is a 16-digit identifier reflected in an article against your name by the sign. So you can see against this name, Jordi, a green sign that is actually ORCID ID. So in case of all the global publishers like Springer Nature, when we publish an article, it's not simply, we don't just simply work on the article, there are a lot many technologies embedded within that article. And similarly, if you have an ORCID ID, then your ORCID ID is embedded in this article and it shows against your name. And it shows that you are a genuine person, and whatever you do, whatever you publish, then keeps getting accumulated within that. And how do you get it? Actually, this slide actually shows, throws more light on the benefits of having an ORCID ID. Now, to get it, all that you have to do is go on Google, type ORCID. You will simply go to the website. It won't more than 4-5 minutes. Just fill up a form, and bang, you get the ORCID ID very simply. It's free for all, but this actually helps because it just not alleviates mistaken identity, but it also adds reliability to you, to your work, awards, affiliations. So suppose if you change your name, or if you use a different version of your name, or you have a name that has been translated into another language, or if you move from one institution to another, the ORCID ID remains same, and it keeps accumulating all that data. So that's why it's really important. And many of the journals and editor-in-chiefs actually are looking for these kind of authors who have an ORCID ID, and they're also looking for reviewers who have an ORCID ID, because that way they can actually ascertain that you are genuine and you exist. So it's important if you want to have a career in academics, or otherwise if you want your research to be recognized, this is another nice way of going through it. Having said that, the main purpose of this section is to help understand the thought process you need to go through in deciding the type of journal that is most suitable for your study. Because now you have a manuscript, and then the next question comes, what do I do with it? Where should I submit? That's again a very, very daunting task, and always up there in the minds of the researchers. Invariably, the goals are to publish quickly. We all want that, and have an impact in the field. This is how you build your reputation and advance your career, isn't it? So, as the slide shows, to do this, you need to choose the most appropriate journal and communicate the relevance of your study to the journal editor. Then, how do you do this? Let's see in the next slide. Most young authors think that their goal is to publish the journal with the highest impact factor. Yes, that helps. I don't deny that it helps. At your CV, it's important because many universities want it. I know even in Malaysia, that's a requirement, but everything is not impact factor. And so the answer is not necessarily. Your goal is to be widely read. That is how you have impact. To do that, you have to be sure to publish in the journal that will allow you to be most widely read. In other words, which journal will allow you to best reach your target audience. Just because you publish in a high impact factor journal does not mean your article will be widely read or cited. And if it is not widely read, it will not have impact that you're looking for. So focus also on the impact of your article, not just the impact factor of the journal. So impact factor of the journal is good because it will look good on your CV. It will really give the impression that you have reached there wherever everybody wants to be. But that does not mean that that will give you more citations. That actually does not mean that your H index will improve, because even within a journal, your article needs to have a certain standard that people will start reading it. It's not necessary that they simply start reading because it is published in Nature or Cell, right? So how do you choose the appropriate journal? That is important. Are those useful? What you have to look for is what we are talking about in this particular slide. You have to see if your findings are only useful for researchers in your specific area, say for example, Asia Pacific, then you should choose a regional journal. It may be hard to convince an international journal editor that your regionally specific findings will be of interest, say, readers in Brazil or in America. If you do have regionally specific findings, but you feel they are they are actually useful worldwide, then an international journal will be appropriate. However, you will need to clearly explain this in your manuscript and in your cover letter to the journal editor. So be very, think about it, give this a thought, where exactly, what kind of journal you should be submitting to. That is the first thing. The second thing is, you also need to decide who will be, sorry, who will be interested in reading your findings. Who do you want to influence? That's important. If you are trying to reach only readers in your specific field, then a specialized journal is important. However, if your findings will have impact for researchers in other fields too, then a more broad focused journal will be more appropriate to reach those readers. Apart from that, the next thing to look for is the publishing model. Now, the two publishing models authors can choose from is subscription and open access. Subscription journals are often more established in the field because these are older journals and do not charge fees to publish articles. However, keep in mind that by publishing in these journals, you restrict access to your findings to only those academics whose universities subscribe to that journal. So if you want your findings to be more widely available worldwide, then open access would be more appropriate for publishing model, and the benefits of open access are not restricted to increased visibility only. There are many benefits that an open access journal has, which is, as you can see over here, that articles published open access receive higher citations, downloads, and views. But the OA model emerged because of funder and institutional mandates. Now, many countries also say that, if they are funding certain research, they would like to see it freely available for everyone else to replicate it. Makes sense. And that is how this model actually came up with. So if you are working on a project funded by such a funder, then the article has to be published open access. And in that case, the many funders actually provide APC or article processing charges to the researchers. These articles are published under a Creative Commons license and can be archived anywhere and made immediately available on publication. Whereas subscription journals require you to transfer the copyright of your article to the publisher. Now, this does not mean that your intellectual property is transferred. No, that always remains with you. But whoever owns the journal would like to receive the license to publish, disseminate, etc., your article, and that's why you transfer the copyright of your article to the owner of the journal. Now, the problem comes with the way in which many of the fly-by-night operators have actually played around with this open access model. That, they say, oh, you submit to us, we'll publish it within 10 days, 15 days, and it will be online. So imagine, first, the basis, the foundation of academic publishing is peer review. If peer review is diluted, if you are a reviewer, do you think you can, the editor-in-chief can read that paper, ask a reviewer to read it, two reviewers can read it, and everything can happen in maybe 10 to 15 days, and the article also get published online. Can that happen? Not really. If that is happening, then which means that something is not correct, something has not been done the way it should have been done. And if that is the case, then you are putting your submission in a predatory journal. But now, as a researcher, it's really very difficult to understand how to trust a journal. So this slide actually talks about that, $1 million question. How do you identify a trustworthy journal? First, check the publisher. If it is from a reputed publisher like Springer Nature, PLOS, Elsevier, etc., we are very mindful of the research integrity aspects, what we publish, and this is not, we will never ever publish predatory journals. So you can be very sure of that you are putting your hard work into the right journal. Also check the editorial board. If it is from a reputed, publisher, or like if even if you do not know the journal, or if you are not very sure, when you're looking at the editorial board and you see the list of international experts, that the names that you are aware of, familiar to you, then we can be rest assured that people like them will not give their name to the journal if they are not confident about the journal. You can also check whether the journal is indexed. That's again important, because as I said earlier, every abstracting and indexing database, they have their own evaluation process. So which means that many checks and balances this journal has gone through and all the parameters are in place. So look for maybe Web of Science indexing or Scopus indexing, etc. And authors, if you recognize the authors, that is something, then that authors that are also submitting in this particular journal. Lastly, fees or the APC is only paid after acceptance, because the APCs are in no way the determining factor in the acceptance of your article. These two things are disintegrated. That is what you have to understand. If somebody is saying, submit to us, submit the payment right now, we'll publish in 10 days, 15 days, then you are getting yourself into trouble. I can tell you, if you are looking to go for higher studies, or if you think that you will be pursuing a line where experts will be looking at your CV. If a CV comes to me and I see those predatory journals or those publishers which are not known for being trustworthy, then you're actually raising a question mark on your CV. And many a times this is done very unconsciously because you are not aware of it, and in a very unmindful way you actually submit it to a journal where you should not have. So be very, very careful. And before we go any further, let's go for another poll where Mabel will come in. You can see, I think, on your screens. What we are trying to understand is, what do you look for when choosing a journal? I have said a couple of things, and I'll again come back to you with certain very nice tools. But before we do that, let's see, what do you look for when choosing a journal? Do you look for the speed, or maybe a good peer review, or an impact factor?
Yeah.
Or
People
maybe
are now voting. Sorry.
Yeah, maybe the readership and the reputation of the journal. So let's see, what is it that you look for?
We will give you 10 seconds to vote. Okay. More than 40% vote for the readership and the reputation of the journal, followed by around 35% of impact factor. And then it is the peer review, and the least is the speed of publication.
What's the percentage they are giving for peer review?
Around 13%.
Okay. That's really nice.
The last is speed of publication.
Yeah. So it's really nice to know that majority of you are bothered more about the impact of your work. Of course, and I can also see that there are 35% bothering about impact factor. So they must be young researchers bothered about advancement of their career, which is quite understandable. Let's go to the next question. Have you ever heard about journal suggester to select a journal for submission? The questions are yes, no, not required.
Another 10 seconds. Okay, is 80% said no, 20% said yes.
That's interesting. So let me take you through this tool. Again, another free tool available. If you are thinking of submitting to Springer Nature journals, then all that you have to do is go on Google and type journal suggester plus Springer Nature, and immediately you will come to this tool. It's very easy to use. You just have to give maybe even a tentative title and say a methods of you can copy paste the methods, put it in this particular window, manuscript text, and thereafter just click. Even you can also identify, like a couple of our friends who say that impact factor is important. Do you have a range? You can just mention minimum impact factor. If you're looking for an acceptance rate, time to first decision, if you are bothered about speed, if you're bothered about indexing services, you can write Web of Science, etc. You can also choose from whether you would be looking at all journals or only open access journals or subscription journals. Whatever you want, just fill it up and then click on submit journals. Within a fraction of a second, you'll get something like this. You'll get a journal, and this will also tell you what the impact factor of the journal is, how many days to first decision. See, I was telling you that, you can also be a smart researcher if you are thinking of, if the timeline with you is less, then you can look at these things. Now, sorry, it goes on moving. Now, first decision. Now, I'll tell you how you can see these days. Now, majority of the Springer Nature journals are giving you an average submission speed. So if you have submitted, how many days average are taking for first decision? So and what is the acceptance rate? So if you are in a hurry, so you can see, actually maybe you can submit in multimedia tools and applications. Of course, this is for a certain journal, that certain article that I ran this for. But of course, over here, acceptance rate is 44%. In certain acceptance rate is very less, which means they are rejecting lot many articles, and the days taken for first decision is a little more. So with this, actually, you can be a very informed author. You can actually take a nice decision which journal you would like to submit to. And once you have identified a couple of these journals, click on the home page of the journal, which you can simply click over here. And this is how the journal will look like. On the journal homepage, you can actually see this kind of metrics. This metrics will give further information about the speed, usage. Now, when we say that we are bothered about the readership, now in the digital world, the number of copies sold has actually gone out of the window. That has lost its relevance. What has its relevance is the usage, because when we sell these journals in packages, how many people, how many researchers come to this journal is actually shown by the usage. So the number which is mentioned over here will let you know how many people are interested in reading this journal. Similar information for usage, etc., is also available on your article, at your article level when you submit in or publish in a Springer Nature journals. These are article level metrics which you can actually take a print of and attach along with your submissions in your appraisal or at the time of your PhD assessment. That again is a very good way of showing that how many people cited your article, how many people are reading your article. Those are some nice statistics which are available to you on the when your article is published with us. But this is also another way of looking at it, your journal level metrics, so that it helps you in decision making. This is important for you as a researcher. Now, this was all from Springer Nature. What if you are looking at another publisher and you are still confused about an open access journal? You are thinking of submitting to an open access journal, but you are still confused. Then for that, you have this website, www.thinkchecksubmit.org. This is freely, again, it's a free resource, and this is supported by many publishers. This website provides an easy to use checklist that researchers can refer to when they are investigating whether a journal or publisher can be trusted. So simply click on check, and what you will get is actually a list of questions like these. And when your answer to all these questions is yes, then which means you have hit the bullseye, which means you have the journal with you where you would like to submit. With this, up till now, we have covered an appropriate journal, and also you have a manuscript. When you have all this, then another important aspect is submission. Because it's only when you submit that the real battle starts, because then you start communicating with the editor-in-chiefs, with the board, with the reviewers. How do you deal with that? First tip again, before we start any further, and again, it comes from the most asked questions by young researchers is, how can I submit to a journal? Now, in the digital world, the answer to this question is always, always submit online by registering as an author, as this is the fastest way to receive reviewer comments and respond, plus get decisions on this article. So most of the global publishers have a journal website. Go on that, look for this thing, submit online. And when you find submit online, click on it, and that will be self-explanatory. They'll ask you to register as an author, and just go on reading that, filling up the information, and you'll reach where you want to. Then another important thing that you have to keep in mind is, and especially moving back to submission, is it is important to understand that journal editors are very busy. Most are not full-time editors, but full-time professors and heads of departments. That means you are competing with other researchers for their limited time. Therefore, having an efficient publication strategy means that you effectively communicate the suitability of your study to them. Make the information they need to evaluate your paper easy to find in your cover letter. So that is what we are going to tackle now, which is the cover letter. First impressions are very, very important when you have limited attention from journal editors, as I've said. It is the first time they can evaluate the significance and relevance of your study. This is how they determine if your manuscript is suitable to be published by their journal. If not, they have many more options to choose from. Just to give you an idea, of the almost 100 journals that our teams are publishing from, only from India, we get close to 50 to 60,000 submissions, and we, the rejection rate is anywhere close to 70 to 80%. So imagine the competition you have. Now, the editor-in-chiefs also want to ensure your study will be interesting to their readers, as journal editor want to improve the reputation of the journal in their field. Just as we are interested in finding the best home for our manuscript, even journal editors want to improve the reputation of their journals. So they are constantly looking for those kind of manuscript that can help them to do that. Lastly, this is the first time they can evaluate your writing style. This is very important. If it is complicated, they can't understand. If things are not put up in a logical manner, they'll lose interest and they'll move on to the next manuscript. Don't let that happen to you. So, how is it that you have to organize this one page, which is so very important for you? Put yourself for that in the shoes of the people that you think will be reading this, the editor-in-chief or the handling editors. Think of it, what they would need to, to get the information they are looking for. So, title of the manuscript, that is what they will be looking for. Article type, whether it is a review article, survey article, or maybe an original article, whatever, it has to be mentioned clearly. Plus the basic question of why the study had to be done. What did you find? How this fits within the scope of the journal. And for this, I recommend that, to review the aims and scope of the journal. That's important. And just pick up some key topics that are emphasized. This will help you to establish the suitability of your manuscript and why the journal editor should choose your manuscript over the many others that have also been submitted. Lastly, you should highlight important issues related to publication ethics, etc. We'll refer to that in the next slide. Now, when you give these key things very clearly in the first page, then you are inviting the handling editor to actually send your article for review. Otherwise, if the article is not within the aims and scope of the journal, they'll immediately reject it. And majority of the articles are rejected immediately because either those are not within the aims and scope, or maybe that's not what the journal editors are looking for. So when you give this information to them, even you save your time, because then you're not waiting for 6 months for the peer review to happen and you realize after that that it's rejected. So this way it helps both the parties. The other aspect is the publishing ethics aspect. Now, if the journals want, if there are certain journals that are review journals, but there are certain journals, majority of the journals, they want original and unpublished articles. Now, many a times I've seen that, authors submit parallelly to simultaneously to different journals. Now, I can tell you behind the scene thing that, we have, we are also using artificial intelligence in different ways. So there are teams that are constantly looking at the journals and they can identify your article duplication even at the time of submission. That really reflects very badly on the image of an author, and both the journals may end up rejecting your article immediately. So do not try to resort to these activities. You first have to submit to one journal. When it is rejected from there, then you have to move on to the next one. If you have submitted that article to a proceedings, then it is fine if, depending on the guidelines that the journals have, then you can submit an extended paper, which has to be extended by either 30% or 50%. I'm talking about engineering disciplines and maybe computer science, where these things are applicable. Again, depends from discipline to discipline. Then conflict of interest. This is something that when you are submitting your article, the forms that you have to fill, those are all automated. They will ask you for conflict of interest. You should mention those things over there. Plagiarism is again another no-no, and publishers like us, rather majority of the global publishers, we use a software called Authenticate. I know that there are many other softwares that many universities are using, Turnitin, etc. All the softwares are good, but it's just the database on which those are run. And Crossref is the one which is supporting Authenticate, and all the publishers are allowing access of their databases to Crossref and Authenticate. That's why the most authentic results come out of Authenticate. So we use that. So the moment your article is submitted, irrespective of which discipline you are from, firstly, it is checked for technically, because what does technical check means? That if the journal instruction for authors says that the article has to be organized in a way that it has to have introduction, abstract, methods, etc., then somebody looks at it whether all those aspects have been actually mentioned or not. If not, they will immediately send back the article to you saying that, why don't you refer to IFA, and these things are missing. Please look at it, revise it, and then submit it. This does not mean that the article has gone into peer review. No, it's just the first step. Then the second step is plagiarism check. Now the softwares, the manuscript is run through plagiarism check, and then the report of that software is embedded in the peer review submission system. So anytime the editor-in-chief, handling editor, can actually look at that report. And it's not just a report. There are teams that read those reports, because report is simply giving you similarity. But similarity could be from your own article. Similarity could be because you submitted your article first in a preprint archive. So human eye is really important. So people look at it, they are experts like you, they look at it, and then they give their suggestions to the board that this is fine, it may be having 80% similarity, but this is from actually preprint server, which is okay to move ahead, or is it not okay to move ahead, or the English is good, English is not good, conflict of interest is there or not there, etc. They give their suggestions, and then again, the decision to move ahead with peer review or not is that of the editor-in-chief or whoever is authorized within that journal to take that decision. So, in today's setup, there are checks and balances in place. That's why I'm giving you this behind the scene picture, so that you understand that it's not that you have submitted and it has gone into peer review. I am safe. Actually, you are not. Many a times there are again through artificial intelligence, even when you have published or submitted or at every stage, there are checks and teams are looking at it. And then if you have already published an article which was duplicated, then the retraction process starts. That again is a big blot on the career of any researcher. So be mindful of what you are publishing, and it's always better to move away from resorting to these activities. And before we go any further, let me take you through another poll, which is about change of authorship. Now, this is another very important aspect of publications. Have you ever changed, which means added or deleted, the author of your article at time of peer review or after acceptance? Let's see what our friends say, yes or no.
Yep. So we are waiting people to vote.
Now, many a times while going through peer review, you are asked for certain experiments, certain other information which you yourself cannot handle, and you take help of other researchers in the community, and you feel that their contribution was significant, and you would like to give them that they have actually contributed in a way that they should be the authors. So then we give these names as co-authors. Or if somebody actually did the copy editing and we feel that they helped you a lot, so they should be co-author. Let's see, Mabel, what people are saying.
Yeah, 88% said no, never change or edit or delete it. Only 12% said yes.
That's nice. I'm glad to know that majority are very mindful of this. So let's go to the next question. What was the reason? And this is basically to the 12% friends of ours who are saying that they did that. Was that because more experiment, simulation, analysis had to be done? Or the new suggested author did copy editing? Or you had to oblige somebody? Or there was discrepancy in the order of the author?
Sorry, the words on the poll is a little bit small, so I repeat all the answers. The first one is more experiments, simulations, analysis had to be done to answer reviewer comments or suggestions. The second one is new suggested author did copy editing or added some text. The third one is had to oblige the suggested author. And the last one is discrepancy in the order of author. So the result is 36% on the new suggested author did copy editing, followed by 26% on the more experiments. And then the third one is 22% on the had to obey the suggested author. So that is the answer.
I see. Now, as far as the 26% friends are concerned, it's absolutely fine if you have to, come up with co-authors because they helped you in analysis, experiments, etc. But if somebody helped you with copy editing, then you can give that an acknowledgement. But those friends of ours do not fall within the definition of being an author of an article. So that's something that we have to stay away from. Obliging is another thing that we have to stay away from. Having said that, when you have when you have submitted your article, and then now the next important step is that you have to actually convince your EIC that this is actually the right manuscript for them to be publishing. But do you ever get this feeling when your article is being reviewed as if all the reviewers are out to axe and shred your work? Well, jokes apart, peer review is a positive process because experts in your field take time out of their busy schedules to give their advice on how you can improve the quality of your study and your manuscript. And they do this for free. By being externally reviewed, peer review ensures that only those studies that are most relevant for field that are scientifically sound are published. And this process then can directly influence the advancement of the field. So that's why peer review is so very important. Now, that's why what you have to do is when you're communicating with the peer reviewers, how you communicate with them is important. So if your article has received comments, then this is actually a good sign. Now it is for you to convince the journal editor that you have all the information they need to make their decision. This is done in the response letter. One of the most common mistakes that authors make in the response letter is, and that journal editors really resent, is that they say, revision is done. If you are an editor, would it be easy for you to dig into various communications? Now, first they have to look at what the reviewers had said to you, what was suggested, where the revision was made. It's really complicated. And because they are so busy, then they'll keep aside your article and we'll move on to next. So be sure to state in the response letter what was revised and where those revisions can be found in the revised manuscript. Make the changes easy to see to. Maybe you can highlight that. This way you can actually facilitate the review process and can help your article to get published or rejected quickly. That's what we all want. So when you're writing a response letter, they want to know why you agree or disagree. Now, see, I'm saying disagree. It's not important for you to agree to everything that you have been asked for. But if you have your reasons to disagree, you need to give those very clearly. They want to know what revisions were made in the manuscript. They want to know where these revisions can be found. And by providing this valuable information, journal editors can actually quickly determine if your manuscript has been fully revised and it is now ready to be published in the journal. Now, another poll before we go any further, because this is also related to what happens if your article is actually rejected. Have you, ever transferred your manuscript to another Springer Nature journal? Yes. If yes, then you already had a destination journal in mind. No. You transferred, but you did not have a destination journal in mind. You never did this, or you don't know what transfers is.
So we will give another 10 seconds.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, still people are still voting. But the result is 41% said no, and 41% as well said I don't know what transfer is. Only 16% say yes with a destination journal in mind.
I see. Now, after having gone through all this, if your article is rejected, is it the end of the world? Not really. If the article has some substance, if it is good logical science, then the editor-in-chief can actually transfer your article to the transfer desk of Springer Nature. What does this mean when they say, when they click on a decision term, reject and transfer? This means that it may not be suitable for this particular journal, but it still has relevance and it can find home within many other Springer Nature journals. So what happens is that the article goes behind the scene to a team of experts who are sitting there. They will actually look at your article and they will give suggestions of certain journals that could be the right home for your manuscript. And that is why I was asking, did you, if when you did that, went through the transfer, did you have a journal in mind? If not, then the transfer desk will come up with some suggestions. And once you choose that, then they will submit the article to actually those particular journals. That way, you do not have to reinvent the wheel. And sometimes if even the reviewers reports can also be transferred if reviewers are comfortable with that. And to facilitate this whole process, we have also come up with broad scope journals in a new brand, which is SN. SN stand for Springer Nature. All these broad scope journals are actually to give home to these transfers, and they are available in different languages, but just one per language. So these are also an option for you to publish your articles. And with that, we come to an end of our coming together. But before we do that, another last thing that I wanted to let you know was, what if you get published? This is the last thing. Now, when you have published, should you put your feet up together and say, relax, I've done it all, I've achieved it? Not really. That's just the beginning. That's just the beginning of your journey, which will take you to the place where you want it to be. So start promoting your articles, use social media as best as you can, present it in conferences, share with your collaborators. Now, another thing which I wanted to let you know was, is that when you are sharing your content, article, then look for a link available on your published article in Springer Nature. You will get a link which is known as shared it. When you copy paste that link, then you can put it up on ResearchGate. You can share that article via email, that link via email to your friends. Now, even if their university do not have access to that particular journal, when anybody clicks on that particular link, they can read it, they cannot download it, they cannot print it, they cannot store it, but they will have access to that particular article. This is another very good way of sharing your information with your friends. And in this way, you will not take away the downloads from your article. That's important, because you have to actually accumulate your downloads in one place. So if you're sharing your link, then your downloads do not go any further. And with that, okay, I think I've taken far more than the time allocated to me. Are there any questions? Because sometimes when I start talking, I end up talking a bit too much. Yeah.
Maybe you can allow one or two questions.
Yes.
Quick one.
Yes.
Is there any
Yes.
question from the participants?
Okay. How do I show my start video here?
If not, maybe I can ask you one question, Dr. Srivastav.
Sure.
As majority of the participants, I believe, are students. What in case if they cannot afford to pay the full publication fees? Is there any facilities to support them?
Yes. See, if they cannot, they do not have the funds to pay APC or article processing charges, then they should look for subscription journals. Only open access journals charge fees, and those journals are actually very less in numbers as compared to the subscription journals. And subscription journals are available mostly in all disciplines, in all the areas, even subdisciplines. So those are a better option if fee is a problem.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Is there any other question from the participant?
Hello. Hello.
Yes, please.
Yes.
Hello, Assalamualaikum. I just want to know. You said that present the facts, do not discuss the results. May I know what does that mean?
That was in a particular section when I was talking about, right? Which section did I mention that?
That is when you present the result, section on the presenting the result.
In the middle, I think I don't remember which slide. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm just looking at my slides to see where I actually said that. So that must be with some reference. Was that in abstracts or? Because in results section, you have to talk about your results. That is where you discuss your results. But if you are talking about your abstract, because abstract is only 250 words, and in that 250 word, it has to be a concise form. Then obviously you shouldn't be discussing your facts there. Let me see, I'm just going through my slides in the iPad. Yeah.
Maybe I can help. It's on your logical presentation slide. On the results, guide your readers through findings.
Logically presenting.
Yeah. All under the results, guide your readers through findings.
In results, we are talking about logically presenting the things.
Yeah, you have several points there.
The initial observation, characterization, and finally how this observation is useful for the field. That is what it is. I think it was more for, see, you have to discuss your results in the results section, but not before that, because otherwise it will be a repetition of the whole thing. So that is why when you're talking about your results or what you achieved, maybe in abstracts, then there's no need to go through the complete details because of the paucity of space for that. That's what I may have mentioned. That's what I remember. Because I'm just going through the slides to see where else I could mention that. If there is any other question, meanwhile, I can find, you know, where exactly I may have said it.
So is there any last question while Dr. Srivastav is looking for the answer?
Yeah, I just want to know where exactly I said it. Then it will be easy for me to. So that's the only thing that I can think of. And even in the conclusion, now two aspects where we need not go into the details of the discussion of results or the facts is one in abstract and second is in conclusion. Because there too you just have to give the things in a line or two. So there is no need to go into the details. Just give the facts as to what you achieved. That is it, without discussing how you did, what you did, and why, etc.
So maybe I can ask one question.
Yes.
Yeah. Normally, in certain journals, they put requirement. I mean, page requirement. Certain journal they restricted the journal the paper to be certain under certain pages. So what about the Springer Nature journal? Is there any requirement for that?
See, Springer Nature is pioneer in digital publishing, and yes, traditionally many of the journals would, you know, look for page budgets, as we call it, because you know they were very mindful of how many pages they are binding that particular journal is in, and that's a discussion that we continue to have with our editor-in-chiefs and with the boards, trying to take them away from that mindset. So in digital world, number of pages has actually lost its significance. Yet there are many journals who still are stuck to these page budgets, and that's why they give you very clear instructions and instruction for authors. So while majority of our journals have moved away for it, there is still you know, a section of journals where we are still negotiating with the editor-in-chiefs, making them understand the importance. But if there is a lot of significance of printed version, then you know there are also certain limitations in binding. You cannot bind big files, and then there are limitations of dissemination. You can't disseminate huge, thick journals. Then it becomes an encyclopedia. So in that case, then those limitations still remain. Otherwise, that's the way forward that majority of our journals are moving towards.
I think, yeah.
Yeah, I have a question. Can I ask a question?
Maybe I
Yes,
think
please go ahead.
time is not on our side. Perhaps this is the last one, last question.
I understand. Yes.
Okay, okay, Prof. Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, you said that. I mean, yeah, based on your slide, I want to ask you one question. That one is it yeah, important to select the journal before writing the article?
Yes, when you are submitting a manuscript, it is important that you identify the journal where you will be submitting, because as I said, majority of the journals have their own instruction for authors, and there are certain things that differ from one journal to another. So when you are submitting, when you know exactly beforehand where you are going to submit, then methods is section is fine. But in introduction, etc., you will have to refer to the guidelines given for the authors. And if you do not do this, then they'll reject the article immediately. So that is why it's important that you need to have the journal in mind, and you should be reading their instruction for authors very carefully while working on your manuscript.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Srivastav. I'm really sorry. I think there must be many burning questions from the participant, but because of the limitation in time, I think. But rest assured, I believe that the talk has been very informative. I think it has benefited us all, right, students? And let us all thank Dr.
Yes, Prof. You are right.
For a very interesting and also very informative talk. And before we end the session, I have an announcement from the Spring in Nature. They have kindly give us a free trial of Spring and Nature journals for 1 month from 25th January to 25th of February. And then you can get the access and the link to the journal from the library website. I think you should leverage on these free trials. What I have been informed that the worth of the database was more than 3 million euro. So I think must be very useful database that you can look and assess, and let's see how beneficial it can be for your research, particular research. And again, I would like to thank Dr. Srivastav for your talk, and on behalf of Center for Postgraduate Study, thank you again. And with that, I would like to end this talk, and I pass this back to the MC.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Doctor, for the wonderful session just now. So with the end of the third session, just now mark the end of our morning session.